With his partner reduced to begging for food and unable to feed his son, William Murphy decided to assert his manhood through violent means aimed primarily towards Gwen Ellen. On one terrifying occasion, potentially to control her comings and goings, Murphy attacked her with a knife, cutting the very shoes from her feet, and proceeded to kick her black.
But Murphy, despite his best efforts, had not crushed Gwen Ellen Jones's spirit entirely. When, in 1909, the opportunity presented itself for her to get away from her abuser, she grabbed him with both hands. Murphy's work took him to Yorkshire, and as Gwen Ellen found herself alone with her son, she vowed never to admit him to her roots again. With her son now solely reliant on her, Gwen found occupation in necessity and turned to sex work to make her ends meet. It's now believed that it was her friend Lizzie who introduced Gwen Ellen to the possibilities and complexities of the trade. Afterwards, when her lifeless body was discovered following the maniacal misdeeds of William Murphy, the British press would have a field day commenting on Gwen Ellen's new occupation. They called her a prostitute, a beggar, and referred to her as a lowly member of the fourth class. In October 1909, as Christmas and her death lurked over the horizon, Gwen Ellen sought protection in the company of another man, Mr. Robert Jones. But by mid-December, Murphy had returned and sought out his partner and child. Gwen Ellen was his, and she would return with him. William visited Gwen's father, demanding to know where she was. Mr. Parry lied, stating that he believed his daughter had returned to her lawful husband. But William promised that if he found Gwen with any other man, he would kill her.
Amidst the darkened streets of Holyhead, Murphy easily swerved Gwen. For a while, his events, he would join Robert Jones in Gwen Ellen. December, Murphy beat Gwen Ellen. Though he would later testify following her death, he did not begin at time. Amidst all this tumult, Gwen Ellen confided to her friends that she only took up with Murphy this time because she feared his temper and could not get away from him while he was in town. Here. 3 nights later, on Christmas Day itself, Gwen Ellen's body lay still and cold in the field at the town, the shadow of William Murphy's loom. Having smothered her, he now took a knife from himself, sliced the tip of her throat, placing his next body. Murphy made no answer, and as the blood from Gwen produced guttural, gurgling sound, Murphy assumed he had not yet robbed her of her life as he had intended. And so, as the North Star shone down, beacon to the lost and lonely, Murphy shoved Gwen Ellen's body into a water-filled ditch to drown her, while continuing to cut at her throat, severing all but her spinal cord. Then, like Death Adam, he placed his claws inside the wound and prized her flesh hard before turning her over and submerging her in the ditch water once again. Murphy then made his way to Gwen Ellen's lodgings, his face covered in his own blood, a reminder of the very last actions of Gwen Ellen Jones. There he encountered Lizzie and his son William, who asked desperately for his mother. In another act of stone-cold cruelty, Murphy looked at the boy, told him he no longer had a mother, and handed him a pen. Murphy asked Lizzie to feed the boy, and took another of their neighbours, Johnny Flavio, to see Gwen Ellen's body. It was later reported that Murphy claimed, "I am not sorry for it. I am glad I have done it. I shall get a bit of rest now." Then, accompanied by a shaken Johnny Flavio, he went calmly to Holyhead Police Station that Christmas night and gave himself up. "I have done it right enough," he confessed to a shocked constable. "You could take my word for it." When the policeman asked him what he had done, He calmly replied, "Kill them." I expect us to learn all this month on not just what you did, but even deeper opportunity that is fascinating with 5 6. Here, the unlikely Henry Tudor rise to cement power for his family.
It is the reign of calamity and threat, putting a stop to some of the practices that had gone before, and setting the scene out for a more stable Tudor dynasty to take power.
How did Elizabeth I honour her mother's memory? Elizabeth's courtiers were very uncertain how to put that happening, whereas Elizabeth knew. And what's Mary I, as bad and bloody as we've been led to believe? Elizabeth is such an queen spin. It's such a good job in making sure that their reputation was what it became. Because it's still not just the Tudors, but a bigger profile. Basically, Sunrise Courthouse on the side of the Anglesey Peninsula when Murphy was tried for the murder of Gwen Jones. The dark brown wood and the smooth blue house of people were those gathered the trial the sense day in Snowfall. Despite tall windows, natural light seemed to invade the snow. Instead, orange orbs of light cast shadows over the grief-stricken face of John Parry, my Helen's father. Beside him, 11-year-old Gladys Jones, my Helen's graduated. Nearby, Gladys will have heard the furious scribblings of journalists desperately piecing together eyes that would go up full of articles. There, he aggressively challenged the witness that was called against him, calling out his scribbling as questions occurred to him. Pressure grew too much to let Gladys Jones, who, had been called to plead emergency. Overwhelmed by Murphy's verbal attacks, the child broke down, tears on his hand. Lizzie Lynn Jones, however, proved much more of a man than her on trial. Angered by the loss of her friend, Lizzie and Murphy insults. She believed Murphy pointed at Lizzie and roared, "That's the woman that caused her death. When I see her with Gwen Jones, I know it was all up with her. I know she was abandoned before, but when I saw her with this one, I know she was worse." But Lizzie stared down the murderer. "You're a liar," she carried. "Hanging is too much for you, but hanging will." On Wednesday, the 12th of January,
At least he got what was coming to him.
Yambala.
He was sentenced.
William Murphy was executed after
Bean Saquinario.
By none other than Henry Pierpoint, father of the most famous British hangman of all time, Albert Pierpoint, who listeners of After Dark will already be familiar with. His execution was opposed by many notable British politicians and celebrities at the time. He became the last ever inmate to be executed at Carnarvon Jail. Maintaining his mountainous bulk, Murphy is said to have walked steadily towards the scaffold. Pierpoint had calculated that at 126 kilograms, a drop of 7 foot was required to end his life. He was correct, for after Murphy dropped, his death was recorded as instantaneous. Murphy's last words were reportedly, "I hope the Lord will have a little mercy left for me."
remains of Gwen Ellen Jones have been quietly laid to rest in an unmarked pauper's grave on the 29th of December 1909. Her father John leaves no archival trace after the trial. Gladys was placed in a union home, and her half-brother William was taken into the care of Dr. Bernardus. They would never meet again. Their history does not end. It just passes from one age to the next. And so in 2019, on the 110th anniversary of the tragic murder, the descendants of Gwen Ellen Jones' separated family reunited once more, a result of the incredible research carried out by a genealogist called Dr. Hazel Pierce. Between them,
That's not what I wanted. Shit.
what had become of Gwen Ellen's children, and even uncovered the possibility that Gwen Ellen had given birth to a third child sometime shortly before she died. A child named Hannah is recorded as having been born in Holyhead in 1909, the very year Gwen Ellen died. Archivally, Hannah is described as Gwen Ellen's sister Jane's adopted daughter. The speculation goes that Hannah was Gwen Ellen's third child by either William Murphy or Robert Jones. If this was the case, Hannah had been cared for by her Aunt Jane because of her mother's precarious personal situation at the time.
While William Murphy's life has been immortalised in a ballad from 1910 entitled The Execution of William Murphy, little was known about the life of Gwen Ellen Jones before the incredible research carried out by Dr. Hazel Pierce.
Gwen Ellen Jones was born on the 10th of October 1874 to John and Jane Parry. The family lived in Stiniog, North Wales, where John worked in one of the local slave mines. The couple's only child, their 9-year-old daughter, had recently died of pneumonia, so when their second daughter was born 6 months later, she was named after their deceased sister, Gwen. The family moved around North Wales as John searched for work, and during this period 2 younger siblings were born, Thomas John and Jane. By 1898, the family had settled in coastal community. At some point after 1891, Gwen's mother died. Her responsibility for looking after her father and her sister family flourished. It might have been for this reason that she married local quarry worker Morris Jones at Bangor Registry Office on the 12th of March 1898. Gwen and Morris never had children of their own, and so Gwen adopted a little girl called Gladys, who had been born in Bangor's workhouse. The 1901 census finds the family, including Gwen's father and 14-year-old sister, living at 4 Tanabonk, a property comprising a kitchen and 2 bedrooms. Also present were 2 lodgers, meaning 7 individuals were crammed into this tiny cottage. Although money was tight, and Gwen's daily routine was one of relentless hard work, life in Llanfairpwllgwyn was pleasant. The younger brother had married and lived nearby, and Llanfairpwllgwyn was a vibrant place. It had a sweeping, elegant seafront called Parade, a concert hall, held regular regattas, and an annual May Day procession, complete with band. Even after Gwen had met William Murphy and her marriage had collapsed, she still remained the centre of the family who depended on her, and it was her death that led to this breakup. Her son was taken into care. Gladys was adopted by a family in Lancashire, and the 2 siblings never saw each other again. Although the lurid newspaper accounts are the means by which most people hear about Gwen, there is more to the life of this woman that is never acknowledged. She was a daughter, a mother, and a sister. Her most important legacy is the reaction of those she left behind. Her sister Jane never forgot her, and this ensured her own children and grandchildren remembered Gwen. Her adopted daughter Gladys was much closer to her than to her stepfather Morris. She always considered Gwen to be her mother and stayed with her when she left the marital home. Gwen ensured she had a decent education, and by 1910 Gladys was bright in a clear and neat hand. As an adult, so affected was she by her murder that she could never talk about Gwen, but she overcame this traumatic event and went on to make a success of her life, becoming a St. John's nurse. It was due to the family's enduring memory of Gwen that Jane's grandson and Gladys' niece were eventually reunited over a century later in 2010. later. It can be no greater tribute to Gwen than
My tummy right there.
So this Christmas, we here at the After Dark team raise a glass to Gwen Ellen Jones. We remember her tenacity, resourcefulness, and the intelligence it took for her to survive in a society that had shunned her. We return with Gwen Ellen and Lizzie to Fardsey Island, where they shared a festive room together on Christmas night, where they laughed and joked about the trials of the year behind them and galvanised themselves for the year to come. Gwen Ellen would not see 1910. Her history acts as a reminder amidst the tinsel and the turkey of the perils many women face at Christmas. In this way, she has been guided to on the yellowing pages of her archive and as a warning of the past. That the lit cloud of Gwen and Jones, far more than just
If you've been affected by any of the materials contained in this episode, please do contact helpline at womensaid.org.uk to access their instant instruction into Women's Aid. Links will be provided in the description of this episode. Also contact the National Domestic Abuse Helpline, which is open 24/7, 365 days a year on 0808 200 247.
And if you would like to make a Christmas donation to Women's Aid, you will experience a significant uptick in the need for their services over the festive period. Please visit www.womensaid.org.uk/.
So I need you.
From all of us,
Regular table looks.
Merry Christmas. Join us in 2024 for more myths and mysteries from the darker side of history. Hello and welcome to this episode of After Dark.
I wanted one that had the toasting.
Today we're delving into a 16th century history that I think it's fair to say is rather dark and grim. It's one about which I knew very little until Anthony and I eventually sat down with our guest, and it's one that I have thought about plenty of times since. It's the story of a woman, Elizabeth Bathory, otherwise known as the Blood Countess of Hungary.
The bloody countess.
She is said to have existed. Elizabeth lived in Hungary from around 1516 to her death in 1650. She was a powerful woman who managed to establish her and her husband's estates. She was also, if we are to believe the evidence given, torturer and serial killer. Whatever the truth around her, but it's
Fighting a fucking burglar.
Before we begin, I should warn you that this episode does contain
Oh. Perfect. Flipboard food.
Pakjoin, Jensel, Bukaru,
Hello,
the Bishi
this
Swing.
episode of After Dark. We are absolutely delighted to be joined by
What? You look like you've never seen me move.
Kim. Welcome to the podcast.
It's nice and toasty in here. I'm not comfy. I'm not freezing.
We've got you on stage to talk about a story that I have to admit I really know that much about until I went on for a bit of a Google rabbit hole, and my goodness, oh, what a story! So we're going to be talking about the blood countess, as she's called.
Forgot all about the baby.
Of course, I'm going to use the slight version. Her name in English is Elizabeth Bathory. She is a Hungarian, Hungarian. Forgive my pronunciation, everyone. It's very close to Bat or Bershevet. I say that last name first. And she was born in 1560. She died in 1613. So again, she's kind of moving in the high Renaissance, early modern period. She supposedly was a very big fan of Queen Elizabeth I. She comes from a very old.
Well, I was trying to give it till 3, but okay.
She has relatives who are cardinals, princes, voivods. Voivod is a Transylvanian term that also means prince or high noble. She and her husband would go on to own the property in what is today 5 countries. They entertained the prime minister. The emperor of the Holy Roman Empire was invited to their wedding. He didn't attend, he sent gifts. Still quite impressive. Yes, she has seen parliaments in the Hungarian court, and she's living in this intersection of events in history that is extremely dramatic. We have the Ottoman Empire ravaging Europe. We've got these wars going on with that. We have the Reformation going on. Part of her family is Catholic, another part is Lutheran, another part is Calvinist. It's the Renaissance, the Enlightenment. It's a change everywhere you look. And against this backdrop, she kind of lives in 2 worlds. Her family is old nobility. They kind of slumber on their estates where they tell legends of their ancestors who fought dragons, while meanwhile the husband that she marries has a court that is extremely modern by the time standards. He has tours from all over Europe. He has famous poets, artists. His parents love anything that's trendy, and first I almost can picture her arriving as a young girl, like dressed in her somber black, being raised a Calvinist, to her husband's very merry Lutheran free-for-all court, and this merger of cultures that arrive when she gets there. It must have been quite fascinating for the time. So she's born to Jewish family, and by marriage she finds herself in a world full of kind of political power, and that she is arguably a sort of a viable player on this board. But there is an absolutely remarkable story around her life, but this isn't the real and end all by any means. So can you tell us the myth version of why her story comes down to us today? She is such an enigma. What's so unusual about her, what's so strange about her, is as she is serving tea to the prime minister, there are reports that, especially for servant girls, are being tortured, victimized, and ultimately killed in the most horrific ways that one could possibly imagine. And it's this dichotomy where she'll appear publicly, like most good psychopathic serial killers, as the picture of elegance, and yet these folks keep saying we see her ladies in waiting, we see her staff. These girls coming into town and they're bruised, they're bloody, they're battered. I mean, they fight it as best as possible, but there's something very strange about them. And these rumors are circulating throughout the congregation of these various parishes as well, where there are these dead bodies that keep piling up. These people in her court keep dying at such a rapid rate that the local clergy is starting to wonder what's going on. And she's always had an excuse. Oh, well, it was typhoid, which, disease was popular even in a wealthy household in that time period. But you can only use that excuse for so long. But it's like, well, why is going accept diseases? Why don't we for servant girls? And it's very particular. The people who are dying or are found bloodied or mutilated or later
I got abducted.
gets very
What about my baby?
castle wall to wolves, or body parts dug up by dogs. There's a dog running through the courtyard, holding a leg or an arm or something. The question is, well, but what's happening? Why don't you? What? And so that's where we start to get now these myths and legends that compound eyewitness statements. Everything I've mentioned is actually eyewitness testimony. The myths and the legends take it even further, that we've got ritualized serial killings that involve not only torture but literally bathing in blood as a sort of mystical beauty cream or beauty elixir. The notion that if I bathe in the blood of specifically young virgin girls, it can't be sullied in any way, it's got to be virgin blood, that's somehow going to have these regenerative powers. Oh, it takes a lot of blood to fill a bathtub. And by the time the myths have her bathing in the blood of, hundreds and hundreds of victims,
Not what I want. I wanted to see if he'll move in.
of her as the infamous lady, the Blood Countess.
The myth is quite gendered then, isn't it? In terms of the gaps that people fill in are, oh, well, this woman must be related to beauty, it must be related to physical appearance. It doesn't sit well with us potentially that it's just some kind of gruesome bent that she has. Naturally, it must relate to her physical appearance and her beauty, which is really interesting, right?
Exactly. And that is something that I will say I spent time trying to find out what really happened by not only translating the original source material, but looking at the literature that came after her. And I think what happens is in the source material, there is no discussion whatsoever of her bathing in blood as a beauty cream and, a way to restore her youth. As you say, it's a very gender-based, sexist sort of fantasy almost. What really happened, she was very meticulous about cleaning up the blood. The killings would take place in wash houses or kitchens where it was very easy to hide blood, clean it out, hose it out. She didn't want anybody to know anything was going on. And there weren't also hundreds of victims. There were plenty of victims, but where probably the story came around was in the Victorian era. We got a lot of these sort of, Gothic novels that started to become popular. And there was an English writer who started creating these wonderful Gothic fictional tales, but they over time started to become perceived as reality. And where the legend started was the tale where one day the Countess, who's very vain, is sitting at her dressing table, and her young servant is combing her hair. And as the servant is combing her hair, she accidentally hits a snag and pulls the Countess's hair. And the Countess has a rage reaction to the pain. She's wearing very big, heavy rings on her fingers, and in a moment of rage, she basically takes her hand and backhands the servant, cutting her in the face, bloodying her nose, and because of that, supposedly blood spurts onto the Countess's hands and face from this young virginal servant girl. At first, the Countess is thinking, ew, yuck, and she's trying to wipe it off, and then when she does, the legend has it, that's when my wrinkled skin is new again. And then it's like, wait, get over here. Let me turn on my face. And of course, the legend spins out of control from that point on. You can only get so much blood from one servant. We need more. And you see this whole mythology that types into the virginal sacrifice, and pretty soon on the altar of sacrifice with this special sort of ritual blood, she's bathing to turn herself from being a middle-aged woman back into her vibrant 20s or something. In reality, she did go to spas, but that was about it.
Kim, I'm so fascinated by the distance that we have between, on the one hand, this huge out of control myth of hundreds of people being murdered, and on the other hand, we've got real human stories of abuse, and it's very dark and terrifying, really. And there's potentially mental health issues in there, all these things. So you've obviously done a lot of work, not only translating original documents from the period in which she lived and to do with the accusations that were set against her, but you spent a lot of time kind of trying to reconstruct the story of what happens and how she gets caught out. So can you tell us, if she's going about murdering, whether it's dozens or hundreds of people, how on earth is she getting away with that, and how does she get caught?
That is such a good question. She gets away with it for actually quite a while. Where we get the legend that there were 600 girls murdered actually came from the trial testimony of a very young child who wished to testify. And in the time, the child got up and testified and started showboating for the courts. Even the people in the day did not believe the child, who has an audience, is saying, oh yes, there were 600 murdered victims. And she kept a diary writing about all of them. And I will just say, no diary has ever been found. In the archives in Budapest, they repeatedly get calls from people asking, do you have the diary? And they over and over say, there is no diary. No. And again, even the judges and the lawyers in the day did not believe this testimony, but it was so salacious, it started to become almost truth being told. And how she gets away with this. There were killings going on, though. The trial records seem to suggest along the order of maybe 50 to 60 victims over the course of about 30 years, which is still a good number. It's not 600. The king, who was trying to get an edict against her, wanted to say the number was closer to 300. That's even a little high, but she had a very meticulous system set up where she had a close band of very, very cruel servants who worked for her. And they would basically do anything that she wanted. So how she gets away so long, it's because of her political status. It's because of her social status. It's very frightening for the townspeople, even for the local clergy who were speaking out in some ways, but they didn't really have a lot of legal power. She essentially over them had complete control over their lives. They were not allowed to have weapons. They were not allowed to travel without permission. They had days in which they had to work a certain amount of produce or animals or harvest that they had to pay to her in taxes. She had armed men who would make sure everything was running properly, and they were terrified because if they spoke against her, the trial would be in front of her or her sheriffs or her appointed people, and she had power of life and death over them. They also could not actually legally lodge a case against her because they were not nobility. So they could speak against each other. They could go to the clergy. The clergy had some power in a moralistic sense or religious sense to chastise her or question her, but legally they couldn't do anything either. So it started to become, well, just rumors.
So if the serfs themselves cannot bring a legal case against her, who is it that brings her to justice? Is she brought to justice in the end?
She is, yes. What happens? She finally pushes too far. It's one thing to do whatever you want with your serfs, but she went too far when she decided, after her husband died, she started to have some financial issues. She did not have a lot of liquid assets. She started to wind up selling off castles. And you can only do that for so long. And she also had a very lavish lifestyle. So in an effort to get more money, she opened up a lyceum for girls. It was going to be a finishing school for girls of the nobility. These tended to be either, in many cases, lesser nobility or sort of maybe mid-noble families, but for them it was an honor to have their girls study and learn domestic and courtly ways, dances, music with this high noble woman. And that was the undoing, because the parents of these noble girls did have legal standing to file actions with the prime minister, with the king's court, and that's what happened. She started doing her usual victimization of these noble girls. When their parents would come to visit them, the parents would be barred or banned. Or if the parents really insisted, no, I want to see her, I haven't seen her in 6 months, and I said, well, they tell them to wait, so that maybe an hour would pass and the girl would come out and you could see. And she had makeup put on, the bruises, the burns, the marks would be hidden in the clothing, the makeup, and she was covered. She had to sit out words with the motion.
That took long enough. She was finding she's pregnant again.
Like in this condition, barefoot, hobbled down the hill into the town, escaping. It was insane. And once the relatives started talking to each other, like going, that was the end day. That's when they started going to the prime minister to say we need to lodge a complaint against her and get her statement.
Robo.
Downstairs history from January the 3rd. I'm going to tell you a story as dramatic and unlikely and as exciting as any starting with the anticipated. Tiny start to 8 o'clock, golden clusters with a rising sun in the dead of a moon. The only recorded the one. Make sure to follow Downstairs History wherever you get the podcast. Don't miss the story of Thomas Cochrane, January 3rd.
So we now have a situation where we've moved from having this ability, then this myth starts to kind of be propagated around her. There are deaths, apparently not directly at her hands, but sometimes directly at her hands. Numbers vary from 50 to 600. She's now being caught out because she transgresses from punishing and killing working class children up to the nobility. So I'm assuming a trial ensues, and if so, what comes out in the trial? What facts are we left with that can kind of wipe away some of that myth making?
So the prime minister who's given legal jurisdiction happens to be a man that she has been very close with. Just a month before her arrest, she attended his daughter's wedding. She called him cousin. So it's a very political situation for him where he's kind of caught in the loop. The prime minister was also requested at her husband's deathbed to care for her as the poor widow. So he needs to bring justice. He's got the pain breathing down his neck. He's got all these nobles coming to him, and yet he knows her. Even right before the arrest, he's writing to his wife, and he and his wife are wondering, is it true? Are the myths true? It's Christmas time. The arrest happens while the Countess is throwing a Christmas party. And if you can imagine this, she's at her manor home at the bottom of the hill. The castle is at the top of the hill. She's having a dinner party, dressed beautifully, and that's when it's almost like a movie where the prime minister, as well as other high nobility, one of them is Countess Bathory's son's tutor, involved her two sons-in-law who had married Countess Bathory's daughters. These were people who knew her personally and well, along with the entire town. Imagine this. Here's the townspeople with torches. Everybody is gathering around the door to the manor house. This is when the prime minister, the sons-in-law, the son's tutor, everybody busts in and make the arrest at this point. I can't imagine what her guests were thinking because they seem not to know anything. She stands up, what is this indignity? How dare you? And I mean, they grab her by the hair. They do a raid of the manor house, and this is where they find girls are hidden away in a back room. So they rescue those girls, and then they physically drag the Countess up to the castle. And again, if you can imagine this train of people with torches in the middle of this snowy, freezing cold night, they get up to the castle, and that's when they find a hell house. There are dead bodies everywhere. They are in states of decomposition. They are dismembered. Some of them are still alive, and they drag her through the castle asking her, look, have you done this? How did you do this? And she refuses to answer. So they put her in prison within the castle while they spent the night bringing carts and wheelbarrows up to the castle, literally to take these dead bodies out and back down into the town. They start interviewing the few that are still alive, who are in tears and horrible condition, who were explaining having been there for months, just systematically being tortured. And much of the torturing is happening by the Countess's immediate staff. Again, some of it she comes to play, I guess I'd say that, or if she's in a bad mood and needs to let off steam, then she participates, but it's her servants doing this as well. As she's in the dungeon of her own castle, they ask her, if you knew your servants were doing this, why didn't you stop them? And she makes this absurd comment where she said, well, even I was afraid of them. And insists until the end, I didn't do anything, which is very pathological. So this trial ensues. There are two trials. In one case, the church is asked to officiate if they want to try her as a witch. There's lots of stories also coming out that in this time where we have not only, the mashup of religions during the Reformation, there's not only ancestor worship, spirit, paganism going on, it's mixed with Christianity. So Countess Bathory thinks nothing praying to the Trinity while invoking a god of cats, to send 90 cats to attack her enemies and, working a spell with a forest witch that she tends to be living with, who's working constant spells to poison her enemies or kill her enemies, or, again, while she's also praying to God.
Kim, it strikes me as being so cinematic, and we know that there have been multiple novels and films written about it. But it's amazing to think that this was the reality. This is terrible abuse, and it's so incredibly grim. She's captured, and we sort of see her in this new light. All her neighbours and contemporaries are seeing her in this new light, and in this context of this strange mashup of Christianity and a sort of more ancient magical beliefs. Are we able, from a modern perspective today, to get anywhere close to thinking about her motivation for these crimes? Are we able to understand her as a person, anything about her psychology, and what led her to be able to commit these things?
I am not a forensic psychiatrist, but I do have my own personal theory. I have had people who practice in that area say that it's plausible. I don't know if we'll know ever officially because, the idea of this sort of Freudian analysis of self or motivation was not part of the culture at the time. But as you say, if we were to approach it through a modern lens, personally, what I think, it's very specific how she would victimize and brutalize and murder specifically young girls between roughly the ages of 11 to 14. And my thought on that is, in her own life, that was the age she was betrothed to her husband at the age of 10, which is very common. It was a marriage contract, and when she was 11, she left her home port to travel to her husband's port. And during that time for herself, between the ages of 11 and 14, before her wedding, when she was 15, her husband 17, I think she herself was brutally victimized as a means of getting her to toe the line and be a good, noble woman and wife for her husband. She was a very strong-willed girl who was used to getting her own way. She had her own staff, and now all of a sudden, this girl, this high-minded, imperious young girl, is at her husband's court, and they're not messing around with this child that's going to someday be in charge of them.
I think it also speaks to something of how we want to consume history in terms of us wanting to find motive. We are fascinated to know why would somebody do something that's so grossly intrusive and violent, particularly when there's a woman involved. It feels like it's almost more unbelievable if the acts are carried out by a female, right?
That combined with the almost complete power she had over her staff, her servants, history of the way the nobility in her family had treated commoners so brutally and viciously, it all came together to motivate this pathological behavior. Sexual deviance tied with the very nature of femininity is what seems to be so apparent in the trial documents. She did not become enraged or torture or victimize men or boys. There's no evidence of that whatsoever. It's almost exclusively this particular age group and gender that are the victims of her insane rage and insane cruelty, that to the point I almost wonder if she would feel, when I was your age, I went through this and I survived it, and how dare you be weak or sniveling? It was the girl's weakness or their imperfection that drove her to such extremes of rage or pathological behavior.
I think as well, Kim, it's obviously such an extreme case and it's such a horrifying case, but it also gives us such insight into women's lives more generally in this period and something of their bodily experience. I mean, obviously not everyone was a victim of this woman or indeed lived the life that someone lived, but I think it gives us that kind of road in. I know that you did have translation work for this, so if our listeners wanted to read any of those translations, is there a place where they can read some of this documentation for themselves?
In my book, Infamous Lady, I have every known trial transcript, letter, burlesque will and testament, depositions, interrogatories, they've all been translated into English. Everything I could possibly find on the planet, especially the second edition of the book. This is the piece where if you want to just read the naked writings of the trial transcripts, to read the naked testimonies of the witnesses who, in those days, the trial practice had it such that if you were brought to trial, you would be tortured to get your testimony. That was just common procedure. And the theory being, if the witness is being tortured, well, obviously they're going to tell the truth. Which is funny because we all sort of think, yeah, but wouldn't that make them say anything just to make the torture stop? They didn't think that way in those days. And you'll see it's fascinating when the witnesses, her servants, who are also brought in chains to trial, are testifying. They are testifying against each other vehemently. And every one of them is killed in a very barbarous way. In punishment for their crimes, we see their hands are cut off. They're thrown live onto the fire. One has her fingers pulled out as part of the punishment. And these, again, are women. The woman servant who was the forest witch, we're saving a witch burning for her. No question, she's getting that. Well, it was interesting. She had one servant boy who is called a lad or a youth. It's hard to know exactly how old he is. He's probably somewhere between 15 and 17. Because of his youth, he was beheaded, even though he participated in these crimes as much as anyone else. And the Countess herself, the question is, did she ever go on trial? The notion of subjecting a noble woman to torture as part of the procedure was unthinkable. Even as unthinkable as the allegations against her were, there was a letter writing campaign to the Prime Minister from her family begging them, please, 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 we beg you, pretty much we'll do anything you want, just do not let her testify whatever you want. And there's all this conflict where the king wanted her beheaded. Her family and the prime minister are trying to think maybe we can quietly put her away in the convent. But when these testimonies came out, it was too much. She's insisting to the end, I did nothing wrong. And she said, submit me to the fire, submit me to the trial, I'll tell you. And I think the pathology too, she, under torture, would be willing still to say, I did nothing wrong, even though everybody was pointing a finger not only at each other, but they did point fingers at her. And those servants, when they were being tried by fire, they were being interrogated separately, and were all saying the same things about the very particular.
No, he just come running up.
When she had
Like, no, mine.
who were not arrested or under trial, but interrogated, they said the same thing. So we know there are definitely 30, 40 murders that she, in cold blood, did.
So we have this trying to bring Elizabeth to account. What does all this investigation, this questioning, what does it lead to in the end? Does she get away with this? Is this something that she's held to account?
She is held to account, maybe not in the way we might have liked. She was not executed. She was actually held in perpetual imprisonment within her castle.
That probably helped clear some stuff up too.
Which might lead to think, oh, well, she could roam the estate. No, that was not true. She did get her just desserts. She survived under house arrest for about 4 years, but if I can describe what she went through, it drove her insane. She was actually walled up in the tower room of her castle. Literally, they bricked up the doors, the windows, only left a little space that they could pass food to her. When the priest came from town to write out her will and hear her confession, they were doing it outside. She could speak through this little hole where they would pass the food to her jailer. Her daughters would sometimes bring her food.
Yeah, I think once I get the chair with the footrest will go like right up under the table. Hopefully. I won't need that chair anymore, and it'll make it easier. I think that's what my gift to myself is going to be this year with taxes. Well, first my glasses. My glasses are a
Why I
must.
say that is because with gowns, the bodices, and corsets of the time period.
Is it me, or do a lot of the lighters we are getting running out of lighters really fast?
Get into and get out of that.
That's not just me?
She could not have reached around and literally got herself out of that dress. So it's strange torture upon herself. She probably had to live in the same dress for 4 years. She would have had to eat the common food of her jailers, which would have been a terrible insult to her, and she was just slowly driven insane. She also was very well aware that the wives of the area high nobles were coming in and raiding her castle of her jewelry. And she was screaming about, my cousin, the Prince of Transylvania, is going to avenge me, and he's going to ride in and kill all of me, and they're like, yeah, whatever. They would not allow her to send letters, see visitors, so the last report is given from Esther's relative who jailer stated that the night before she died, she probably had congestive heart failure and circulation issues, and saying that she was very cold, and her jailer basically said, well, I don't know, put a pillow under your legs, I don't know, and he commented that she was that night at around 2 a.m. in the morning she passed away. So that's what happened to her. We have never officially found her grave or burial site, though.
Her legacy seems to me to live.
What if they just left her in the tower?
In the myths that we've spoken about, in the history that you've written about, in this fictionalized way that.
I mean, it was already bricked up all the way. Might as well. Fortunately for her, anyway. But if she really did kill like 600 girls, she kind of deserved it.
Readers or other researchers, and one of the most interesting letters I received from someone who had read the book told me she was extremely angry with me that she was the Countess incarnated, and how dare I tell her story to the general public. And she was just enraged, and I thought for a while, how do I respond to this? So I wrote back and I just said, first of all, thank you so much for reading the book. Your ladyship, I'm so sorry I gave offense to you, but I have to tell you though, it's been 400 years, and a lot of people know the story, and what I'm trying really to do is just to tell the true story of what really happened. I'm actually, trying to defend you against a lot of defamatory stories that have also come out about you. And it was so funny. The person wrote that. We're doing email, and she writes back. She says, well, all right, thank you, then. Okay, good. Dodged a bullet on that one.
After everything you've just told us, there is one person that I would not like to get on the wrong side of, and that seems to be Elizabeth Bathory. But thank you so much for sharing those details with us. So fascinating.
I think so, too. Thank you.
And all of this information is.
I think she's a fascinating read. I've just heard the story so many times. She's one of the most famous ones.
So hours of research and new information I'm sure to find, and you've done such a fantastic job in bringing this story to life. So thank you so much.
I don't know what the hell I did with my phone.
I'm just gonna say this if you'd like to get in touch with the show, perhaps you have a suggestion for
No, that's gonna get all over my controllers.
to explore, then please email us at afterdark@historyhits.com. That's afterdark@historyhits.com. If you're still enjoying your holidays, festive period,
I'll be here somewhere. Back the chair up for me.
Show. Maybe if you're talking about your own.
You don't really need the table anymore.
Close to you.
Really trying to get the tables cleaned up. I don't know a lot of it cleaned up.
Hello and welcome to the Dark Mix.
By arrows, poisoned, tortured, blown up by cannon, it's splattered all over our history books. Who might be talking about what violent recent deaths?
Yes, you're going to hear all about them with our guest today, Dr. Susie Edge. Now, Susie is a doctor in school. She's actually a real medical doctor compared to Anthony and I. PhDs are not medical in any subject. Susie is best known on TikTok, and you can follow her there, which she has a huge.
Let's leave it to Susie to explain the ins and outs of the gruesome deaths of monarchs in this week's episode. Hello, and welcome to this episode of After Dark. It's Harrowful. I'm Dr. Mansfield today. And on today's episode, we are delighted to be joined by one of the now, Susie is really way quickly. First, and then myself, before moving on to clinical medicine and the doctor. Then turn the whole thing on its head. Now, you may be familiar with Susie, particularly where she has more than 4,000 followers. She's also been called Mortal Monarchs, 1,000 years of open deaths, and the newest vital organ in the history of the world's most famous travel bonds. Susie is joining us today from the cottage in County Highlands, and their dog Scout, and we must not forget Scout. Scout means obviously the utmost importance in this conversation. Susie, thank you so much for joining us.
Hello, and lovely introduction. Thank you. Susie, we're absolutely
I mean, it started a very long time ago because I was interested in studying history. It was one of those scenarios where I also happened to mention that I enjoy the sciences, and of course I was told, well, absolutely, let's go down that line. Not going to take you anywhere. Humanities generally don't do it. So I was told to study medicine, and one has to give up, really. Academically, one has to give up. I read, had other interests while I was studying medicine and working as a doctor. And I thought this was part of an MFA because they let me in and said, I'm going away. Let's wait my turn for the next. I came back again and I tried again 2 years later and they got me 2 years.
I want to history from another background as well. Before I did a PhD, I still now I'm an actor, but my kind of other discipline definitely informs how I do history. But I'm just wondering, I mean, obviously we're going to talk about mortal monarchs and the death of monarchy here, but how do you think those prior experiences inform historical investigations?
when it comes to just the basic, the superficial level of going into the history department and starting, I really take over the place. In fact, one day I walked into a classroom and there was a quote on the screen and it said something in German and all the other students get them to explain it to me. At that point I felt really like I was up against it because these guys had all been, from the age I started studying medicine, they had been studying these other things around it. And I beat myself up a bit, but for a while there I didn't realise that when I studied medicine, there was a different way of doing things. And you're right. I do maybe come at history differently. I think the way it informs me is not necessarily how I go about research or study, it's more that my interests. And so going back to Maddie's initial question, it's more about what I'm interested in and what's going to excite me and hopefully
So, Susie, we're in a moment where historical technology
idea of the current direction of study, the current thinking really excites me, but it's not how I came to it. I didn't go out there and think, what's the current thinking, I want to join in with that. It really wasn't like that at all. But it was exciting to find that, for instance, when I have looked at what I might do further study-wise, and looked at what was the interest really exciting to me. So the thought of further study in that world, brilliant. So yeah, it seems to be on a level playing field there a little bit. But when it comes to what I'm looking for, I think a lot of people seem quite surprised to look at how much the body was in there, how much medicine was in there, and how much I was trying to extrapolate. Really, there's only so far you can go. Words that have been used in the past or phrases or ideas, there's only so far you can go. Everything
Something sizzling. What's broken?
Yeah, it does make me a little bit nervous because I do come at it as a medic. I do worry that perhaps
The dryer's broken again.
as a rigorous historian enough, I can solve that. But then I do have to go back to them and say that I'm a medic and it's a human body study that excites me as much as anything else.
I don't buy into this either. I mean, I come from a kind of similar place, and this kind of idea of rigor and what is rigor in one sense. Like, I find it rigorous to reach as many people as possible to new histories that they might not ever have experienced before. Without a shadow of a doubt, you and
Gibson!
I just think that's invaluable. Like, you could research the most intensely worthy piece of historical research that 10 people are going to read. Or you can do something new in a very narratively engaging way, which I think you do excellently, and reach a bigger audience, get people talking about history, and give them that kind of insight into a part of the past that they have never really experienced.
I'm really glad you said that, and this is how I feel. I make very short videos online, and you have to edit them, and you have to have an understanding of what the viewer that that's the case, that it can only say so much in 60 seconds. But I hope that these are a gateway to if people are interested to go away and have a look at more. Quite often I get people saying, oh, you forgot this, you missed that. I said, well, no, I didn't. It was a deliberate editorial choice to give certain information. That's all the time we've got. And that comes across as fun because I think somewhere along the line some people have squeezed the joy out of some things. Sometimes we diplomatic, but I try and be fun, and that sometimes that can be interpreted as me not taking everything so seriously, and that's maybe anything. As well, you asked me earlier how my being a medic informs what I do and what I read and what I write, and it does actually inform it in that I have spent a lot of years doing and seeing things that are really rough, really hard to deal with, really, it goes through a lot when you're in hospital. And if I'm going to spend the rest of my life doing something like this, then the chief amongst my goals is to have a bit of fun along the way.
I think as well, like it's not even. I mean, they are great gateways, but I was reading Vital Organs yesterday. There's stuff in there I've never heard of. So it's not just a gateway for me. It's filling that world, coloring in things that I hadn't known previously and that other people hadn't known previously. So I think it's really
Nice toasty in here now.
Because I'm looking at your book right now. But it's really vital information. But let's take us to some of those deaths and some of those bodies that you have written about so well and talked about so well on TikTok. Are there any particular deaths or bodies that you have particular interest in when it comes to the monarchy and the ways in which they died? Anything? Give us the most gruesome one you can think of.
It's the 1,000 years that I looked at because, again, I had to, even in a book that was 70,000, 80,000 words long, I still had to edit out, I still had to choose who was going in there. If you look back at the 1,000 years, it starts off with a lot of trauma, it turns into infectious problems, and then we get to the lifestyle-related conditions that we tend to suffer from now. And it does reflect society as a whole, which I really like seeing that slide. There's this huge chat around that scene, and so I really love to tell the story of what happened to Mary II. Mary, who was married still when Boris said William and Mary lived together for a while, but she died a long time before him. And she died of smallpox. She didn't just die of smallpox, she died of hemorrhagic smallpox. And that's something that raises an eyebrow because people say, well, surely smallpox is bad enough. And I go, oh, no. It gets worse.
Take us through some of these horrendous and grisly symptoms that you take.
Yeah. So what happened with Mary was that she felt that she was ill. She had those flu-like symptoms that you always get at the beginning of the week. Headachy and joints were aching. She knew something was wrong. She thought she had measles. She liked to
get it?
She burned it off the diary.
No.
She thought that this was the end, and she's right. But it's
Couldn't he add you somewhere else to talk? Facebook or
Then
something?
the pustules came. And the pustules were
My sister said she'll
measles, but this
add
was
him
smallpox.
and she can give
Raised on the skin.
him by his marriage.
Go that way.
And they didn't
Then
just
she'll
rise
have,
up, but they
then he'll have
joined
Both of you.
her and me.
Well, yeah, and that's all he really wants. He just wants his family. It is hot down here. I just turned the fan on. That's all he's wants. He's been in so much trouble lately. He just wants a family member to connect with him.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if there's a way for you to talk to him on your Oculus.
Oh yeah, Discord is the main thing I use.
Yeah, I know it. And then that's what y'all are having trouble with?
Yeah.
I mean, you could probably go to my Discord and send it that way.
It said it's asking him to verify his user and he'll wait until he gets home.
Oh, so you can't do it right this second. Okay, no problem.
I told Sissy to hold on to your phone in case he responds.
But I think you'd be a good influence on Noah.
Yeah.
He may be older than you, only by a year or two, I think. But I think you'd be a good influence because he's had
the ankle bracelet that the
one that got in trouble for firing a gun at a car. Now, see, you'd never pull something like that because I've taught you better. And you don't hang out with crowd like that. Believe it or not, who you hang out with makes a lot of difference. Mommy learned that the hard way.
I guess I got good friends.
Mm-hmm. You don't get in trouble. The only thing we got to work on is your grades and your hygiene. Again, you were doing good with your hygiene there for a good while.
Yeah, last year.
But now, and Grandma gave you all that stuff to wash with.
Yeah.
You can go back to school smelling good.
Clean clothes, that's why.
Would you go through the baskets? There's plenty in these baskets.
Well, I know they're there, but where?
What do you mean, where are they?
Throw them.
You're supposed to sift through them to find your clothes. What do you want me to do? Fold them and give them to you again?
It does take away some of that status.
I know that makes it easier on you, but it makes it harder on Mommy. Especially since y'all don't help with the rest of the house. If y'all would start helping with dishes and stuff, I could get laundry done, and if you'd actually clean your room.
Yeah.
Noah can drive.
That's why I'm trying to do my clothes alone. I just gotta get them out.
See, here's the good thing about having a cousin that has the same disorder you do. He might come down and help. Because it's easier for us to help our friends clean their rooms versus us actually cleaning our room. So I said, you and Sissy need to switch because it's easier for us to do for others. It's weird how that works, but it does. But Noah was just...
I'm getting back to myself.
I'm saying he could help.
Yeah, we're told.
Or at least sit in there while you
I
do
just need to
it.
learn how to clean up carpet sometime soon.
You need a body double. Like Sissy needs to sit in there while you clean. Body doubling helps. I know, these are terms you probably don't understand.
Supposedly died of the same thing.
Go take a shower.
He died of soldiers' death. A lot of his soldiers died away.
That'll get all the sweat away, and your face looks awful. You need a shower.
King John's dysentery and Henry V's dysentery, ultimately the same pathophysiology, but we're told to think about it in a very different way. I find that fascinating.
Interesting. We're being so.
Yes, but he's family, and he won't mind.
Sometimes isn't there like something on the moon or something?
Yeah, well, this was before. My book started in 1066. Again, that's where I had to draw a line.
Yes.
Before that, Edmund lowered his bomb and up came and sawed off his rear end, and that was the end of him. And there were others as well. There were a couple of Bohemian things that were supposedly died in this way. I have this idea that there's this specialist assassin who but yeah, again, he's supposed to be paid well, I think. But I think these are just stories of, this is a nasty, grisly, cold, smellless thing. Yeah. I think we're obviously very drawn to the very undignified and quite glorious. And they do.
I'm saving just because last night the game like froze on me, and I ended up back before the child was a toddler, and I don't know how that happened. I thought I saved it, but I didn't. Now he won't go back to being a toddler.
Whether we can take some of these. Is that what the wealth of information there in the article? Yeah, when I, as you say, pinch of salt, I like to bring a whole cartload of salt along with me to some of these stories. Yeah, the thing is that the Mortal Monarchs, this book is essentially a book about all the different ways we can die. But it's written through this lens of looking at the monarchs because they're characters that people know. And they were written about. And if there wasn't a story, if there wasn't a decent story of somebody actually sitting there with a plate down and a bunch of things that happened, then they were made up and they were embellished. And so there are often poison stories. And yet, I couldn't really find any decent poisoning stories going on. But if anything happened, people weren't quite sure what happened because it was behind closed doors or they thought they were being fed alive. Everyone was oh, this was poisoning, it must have been. And we see that for hundreds of
I don't even know what that means.
Yes, they were written about more extensively. I like to tell the story of a specific person, and going back to my other book, Life at Orphans, I did that as well. So if there were stories that came up about original bodies, for instance, I would read a lot about someone stealing something like have their hands taken off. But if that wasn't associated with an actual person, then it didn't make the cut for me, because I like to have the person and so the monarchs work for things like that. But yeah, absolutely. If there wasn't a decent story, then it would often be made up and it would often be more gruesome. I'm Professor Susanna Lipscomb, and all this month on Not Just the Tudors, we're diving even deeper into the dynasty that has fascinated us for 5 centuries. How did the unlikely Henry Tudor rise to cement power for his family?
It is a reign of calamity and threat. It's putting a stop to some of the practices that have gone before, and then setting the scene out for a more stable Tudor dynasty to take over.
How did Elizabeth I honour her mother's memory? Elizabeth's supporters were very uncertain how to talk about Anne Boleyn, whereas Elizabeth took a different view. And was Mary I as bad and loving as we need them to believe? Yes. Been consistent. She's big job in making sure that Mary's reputation was what it was meant. Subscribe and follow Not Just the Tudors from History Hits, wherever you get your podcasts.
All the room for daylight.
We've talked about the status of the monarch's body while they're living, but there's also something that has happened when the monarch dies then, and this person passes away and you're left with what? And all that divinity, I guess, has left or is in the process of leaving. Is there a formula through which people approach the monarch's dead body then?
Oh, not old enough?
Time period, I'm guessing.
I think it changed, but it also changed not necessarily through time period, through sort of society's views of the dead body. It changed more through the actual individual cases, and again, it goes back to the stories we're being told to believe about the body. There weren't many that used to be teach, because you could see under the ground, you left alone. Many of them were dug up. The stories of what happened to the body after death sometimes are even more interesting than how they died. For instance, the story that we got about William the Conqueror, being thrown from his horse, thrown into the tunnel, and after his death, people love to go back to William the Conqueror, the owner of the body and when they tried to stop his body, I think there's maybe something in that, so I think it's going on. Stuff, big, but the whole idea of the story but it's put on to it because the king, so he's gone, he's dead, and we're still telling these stories about how bad he was, talking about his body and everything. And there are quite a few of those that goes on from his son, Henry the First, then when that he died, but then his body had to get home from France, he wanted to and on the way, Henry VIII as well, there's a similar story with him, that on his way to being buried, there was so much king-sacrified stuff dripping out the bottom of his coffin that dogs came and laughing up at the suggestions for him. And so there are so many post-mortem stories as well. They don't stop. They don't just go, oh, the king's dead, you know, or you know, this idea that someone who was faithfully wouldn't work. And so everybody confesses from the story from the day that he died. These other guys get their feelings. And do you look at their death and find evidence of that? And if so, will that allow us to maybe be I think the most obvious one that springs to mind is go there, don't we? The story of Edward II that he was proposed by his wife and the lover, and he was held down under a door or something heavy, which isn't the first thing you think about, is it? But you know, that's the story. And then the other one got people said that yeah, classic, yeah. I heard that story probably when I was about 7 or 8 years old. But I think that's very strange now that somebody would be telling me that. But it's a story that has been told for hundreds of years. And it still goes on. And now it comes to that, oh, it probably didn't happen, but we're still going to do it anyway. And that's the route that I took, because again, it's a true thing. And I did talk about how one might die from having a red hot photo medically, physiologically maybe a better way of cooking it. You could fiddle around with the red hot cocoa and it might be a bit sore, but you can really go for it. The reason for it was supposedly because this idea that the screams were heard beyond the walls of the castle. Well, yeah, if we're trying to keep it quiet, we're probably going to do something that's going to cause massive screaming, massive blood loss. So yeah, there's a lot of reasons why it's that way. We're trying to comment on his life, and that was a commentary from the religious men who wrote it, that this was about homosexuality and that. Again, I but that bit didn't come up. So, that was something that came up later on, the horror probably didn't follow him.
Yeah, it's always one that intrigues me. And it's still the fact that it is over appearance is basically it's pointing towards something very kind of sexual. Quality more than I think they get. But it starts to become just closer into those
Going back to was he murdered by his brother William II? That's something in the new.
Why would you hang him up in the rain?
And Harold's the death and was left I don't know whether it's because comments that people
We'll be right back to the Sims in a moment.
What about that? But people are very, very sure of themselves. And if I were to make a video about William II's death, half of the comments would be, he was absolutely killed by his brother. Half of the comments would be, no, he wasn't. And they're so very sure of themselves. And I sit in the middle thinking, I think
Idiots. Nobi. Martha? Oh, jeez. I'm Bo. Demoy? Sonoba. Demoy? Capena.
Where a weapon went in the back of his head, went through his brain and nicked the skull on the side of his head. You could see that with the CT scan. He could be dated to within 50 years. And that you
Baby,
can
baby.
those
Joseph will be, huh?
tickets are no doubt was the body of Richard III. Very federal mistake there. And cases where people really want to know more using this technology. So, because this was one of the princes in the tower. He was killed by Richard III, so you know, but some bones were found in the tower.
Koya.
And it was assumed that
Samoya. Ayabu.
Oh, my plants are dying. Why are all my plants dying? I'm not going out there to get them. She won't sleep in the bed correctly. That's why she can't get any sleep.
I really find myself sitting in the fence because, on the one hand, so, you know, I really do sit on the fence, so I'm not sure. But you do have to take that same argument about having a burial and being left on the ground should be for everybody. You have to draw the line, because then archaeologists must have a look at them and find out more about the disease and what happened. And that's wonderful. But are they any different to Edward V who could or could not be in the tower?
We have a very immediate example of this, right? Because following the death of Queen Elizabeth II, we saw that kind of veneration for the body of the monarch unfold over time. And if you think about it, the body of the monarch and the way we were supposed to interact with the body of the monarch really before those dogs, because they had this and you've had to queue for a certain amount of time to be worthy of standing in the presence of the monarch. It's really easy for us to think, you know, oh, these things are happening in the 11th century, they're happening in the 18th century, but we're observing some of those. I can imagine
He was doing something, according to Robert.
No, and then went back to my plan. We were supposed to originally get him on my Xbox, but we just didn't do this.
But you did get it.
Get it got his context.
Awesome.
The monarchs of the last century. It was exactly the same. The pictures were the same. My book, Modern Monarchs, actually was due to be published 3 weeks after the Queen's death. And so it was certainly, I'm really worried about my book about it. But when I saw that, because it hasn't happened in our lifetime. It's only something that we've seen in history books or on grainy, black and white cafe pictures.
When we're talking about the depths of
it says it's a game, so fuck off. I like playing with it.
Far in the past history. But actually,
Oh, there's a kitty there. Mango. Oh, it gave me mango.
Medical situations. One of them being euthanasia, end of life care. And it's not that long ago, within a century, that George V died. Now, George V was lung cancer, smoker all his life. He was at the end of his life. And his doctor, who was killed by George V, recognised that. He understood. But the thing is, no matter how hard you try, you cannot look at somebody who is actively dying, to put it, and say exactly when it's going to happen. So, old Washington was sitting there with the king and thought, he's on his way out, I'm not sure when. And he was worried because there are 2 different times of day that newspapers are printed in the village. And one of them is the tabloids and the other is the bullshit. And he did not want the news of the king to be in the tabloids. So he decided that he was going to time the king's death. And the only way to time someone's death is to do it.
Come on, stop spinning. I got a nose ring. It keeps spinning inward. That's why you see me playing with my nose all the time. And I don't have another one to change it out with right now.
Oh, this really does fit into the story. We're still having this.
Okay, so you got shit to do?
Helping the king on his way.
She's not really doing good at a law career.
Yes, he did it. He murdered the king. He wrote about it in his diary, and that's how we knew about it. He was very explicit about it. The other thing was that Lord Dawson of Penn wasn't even up. I mean, he stood up in the House of Lords and advocated euthanasia. He actually.
I really don't care about the fame anymore.
He did it to other people as well. Other members of his family as well.
She was famous enough to leave her mark. That's all that matters.
There are people that get upset with me when I say that because they're saying, "Oh no, he did it to help the king along. The king must have been in pain at the end of his life." But in truth, he was killed, and it was not that long ago.
But we're going to have you back on, Susie, because I want to hear more about Lord Dawson of Penn. If this is something he's going around doing more often, I think there's something in that. We'll definitely have a chat about that on another episode sometime. But my favourite one is Favourite. And then I want to hear everybody else's favourite one, by the way, as well. So start thinking about what your favourite one is. I'm kind of gruesomed out by Queen Caroline, what was it, 1737, I think, and the kind of prolonged agony that she had to face, and the description of the matter, I guess, from her bowels that was making its way through a hole near her navel after a botched operation. And it was soaking so heavily that it was destroying the sheets that she was laid in the bed as she died and running onto the floor. And there were people there keeping account of this. And it's very intense to think of the smell and kind of frightened and just the discomfort that she must have been in, but also that people that were there watching their mother, their wife, their friends die. For me, that sounds like one of the worst ways to go. It's prolonged, it's painful, and it's cinematic. This episode we have an audience. Susan, do you have a particular one that stands out?
What stands out there is that you're making a good case for Lord Dawson of Penn.
No, yeah, no, it's true.
He really likes that little chair of his. Glad I got it. I can sit up. Keep that.
I guess Stuart, I made a video a wee while ago. It was a long time ago, actually.
Oh yeah, now that I have my phone back.
Supposedly had COVID. He stood up and said, "I've got the best medical men in the country as far as I'm having all of these new experimental drugs." And I listened to that and I thought, that's what Charles II said. He had all these medical better out with the
Want to get more from Killer Psyche? Subscribe to Wondery Plus for early access to new episodes, ad-free,
clean clothes,
content you cannot find anywhere else. Join Wondery Plus in your Wondery app or on Apple Podcasts. A listener note: this episode contains adult content and is not suitable for everyone. Please be advised. 1991 was a huge year for Chicago Bulls basketball player Michael Jordan. In June, the Bulls had won their first national championship, in no small part thanks to Jordan. And that same year, he won his second NBA Most Valuable Player award. Jordan's talent and personality had already made him a global superstar, and he was sponsored by some big-name brands, including Nike and McDonald's. In August, Jordan added another sponsor to his roster, the electrolyte beverage Gatorade, who launched an advertising campaign around the slogan, "Be Like Mike." The first commercial features some of Jordan's professional highlights, mixed in with him playing basketball with the kids in the neighborhood and having fun. And of course, drinking Gatorade. The song in the ad was sung by adults and children, and the lyrics were about dreaming big, dreaming that you could be a superstar just like Michael Jordan, that everyone wanted to be like Mike. But as we all know, not everyone wanted to be like him, or the positive, talented role model that he represented. In fact, Australian Matthew Millott went in the opposite direction, designating his uncle as his room. And that would not have been a problem, except that his uncle was Ivan Milan, the infamous backpack serial killer. And Matthew was determined to be like him in every way. Audible's Best of 2024 picks are here. Discover the year's top audiobooks and originals in all your favorite genres, like sci-fi, mysteries, thrillers, and of course, true crime. Audible's curated list in every category is the best way to hear 2024's best in audio entertainment. They have titles like a stunning new full-cast production of George Orwell's 1984, or heartfelt memoirs like Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson's Lovely One. Plus, there is the year's best fiction like The Women by Kristen Hanna and Percival Everett's brilliantly subversive James. My favorite from this year is the haunting memoir Fever of Unknown Origin, a story of medicine, mystery, and magic by Judith Ford. Go to audible.com/psyche and discover all the year's best waiting for you. Killer Psyche is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. What if comparing car insurance